Welcome everyone to this explainer. Today, we are going to completely unravel the notoriously complex, genuinely mind-bending plot of the 2001 sci-fi psychological thriller Vanilla Sky. Directed by Cameron Crowe and starring Tom Cruise, this is one of those movies that has sparked intense debate for well over 2 decades now. Since we know you guys love getting into the weeds with us, we're going to do a deep dive straight into the detailed story plot. We're going to break down exactly what happens, untangling all those intricate narrative threads step by step.
So let's just dive right in. We are jumping into a mystery that basically asks us to question the entire fabric of reality. Just imagine opening your eyes to find yourself sitting in a bleak, claustrophobic prison cell. You're wearing this terrifying, rigid prosthetic mask that completely hides your face, and you're recounting a brutal murder. A murder you don't even fully understand, to a court psychologist named Dr. Curtis McCabe. Well, that is exactly where we meet our protagonist, David Aames. And to figure out how on earth he ended up here, we have to rewind.
All right, part 1, the Playboy and the Crash.
Okay, so before the mask, David Aames Jr. is your quintessential Manhattan playboy. He inherited this massive publishing company from his dad, leaves all the actual heavy lifting to his trusted associates, and basically just lives a life of absolute, unchecked privilege. During this incredibly extravagant party, his best friend Brian Shelby introduces him to Sophia Serrano, and bam, David falls instantly in true love. He spends the night at her apartment, completely captivated, and his life just seems utterly perfect. But, that is a staggering contrast to the reality we just witnessed, right? A disfigured, completely withdrawn prisoner trapped behind a rubber mask. So what actually bridges the gap between these two extreme versions of his life?
Well, unbeknownst to David and Sophia, David's current, kind of casual lover, Julie Gianni, had actually stalked them to the apartment. When David leaves Sophia's place the next morning, Julie pulls up and offers him a ride. And once he's locked inside that moving car, she just unleashes all of this deep, volatile jealousy over Sophia. In a moment of sheer emotional destruction, Julie deliberately drives the car straight off a bridge. The violent impact kills her instantly, but it leaves David horribly, permanently disfigured. And then the doctors deliver the devastating news that they absolutely cannot repair his shattered face with plastic surgery, which condemns him to wear that eerie prosthetic mask just to be able to face the outside world.
Moving into Section 2, a waking nightmare.
So the rapid escalation of David's psychological break really kicks off after this absolutely terrible night out. A drunken, deeply depressed David insults his best friend Brian, insults Sophia, and ultimately just passes out in the freezing street outside a club. The next morning, Sophia returns, she apologizes, and David slowly begins to recover, and then suddenly the impossible happens. Surgeons miraculously find a pioneering way to completely repair his face. But almost immediately, these totally bizarre experiences start bleeding in. First, he's at a nightclub and meets this mysterious man who tells David he is omnipotent and then proves it by making the entire booming club fall into a terrifying, suffocating silence right on David's command. Then, the true horror hits. David wakes up at Sophia's apartment, but he finds himself in bed with Julie, the woman who literally died in the violent car crash. Even more terrifying, Julie's face has completely replaced Sophia's in all of the photographs around the room. In a state of absolute frantic confusion, David suffocates her. And that right there is the murder that lands our restored-faced protagonist in a prison cell.
Actually, fun little side note here, director Cameron Crowe used this specific quote from an early Elvis Presley interview to set the really lonely, impressionistic tone for the film's descent into madness. It perfectly captures David's internal isolation. Even when surrounded by his seemingly perfect, newly reconstructed life, he is entirely alone in his own fracturing mind.
Which brings us to Section 3, the cryonic dream reveal.
So what is actually going on here? How did a permanently disfigured man's face magically heal right before he committed a murder against a woman who was already dead? Back in the prison, Dr. McCabe helps David recall the phrase life extension. After seeing a commercial on TV for it, McCabe takes David to their corporate headquarters under armed guard. A company rep, Rebecca Dearborn, explains their highly confidential service. Get this. They use cryonic suspension to save people with terminal illnesses, freezing their bodies until a future cure is found. But to keep these patients from going insane in the frozen dark, they keep their minds active in a completely customized, lucid dream state. And then, David realizes the horrifying truth. He is currently in cryonic suspension. The world he is inhabiting right now, the prison, Dr. McCabe, the murder, it is all his own lucid dream, and it is violently turned into a nightmare.
Realizing this, David completely snaps. He breaks away from his guards, sprinting wildly through the building, just shouting for tech support. Suddenly, the bustling corporate lobby is entirely empty. An elevator opens, and inside stands that same mysterious man from the nightclub. He introduces himself simply as tech support. As the elevator climbs up this impossibly dizzyingly tall building, tech support drops a massive bombshell. David has been frozen in cryonic suspension for exactly 150 years. I mean, let that sink in. The immense emotional weight of that displacement just crashes down on him. Literally everyone he ever knew or loved has been dead for over a century.
So why did it go so wrong? Tech support explains the real history. Unable to face the devastating loss of Sophia and the isolation of his facial injuries, David had handed his company over to his dad's associates, taken a lethal overdose of medication, and opted for life extension. He actively chose a program where his life would simply resume the morning after Sophia found him passed out on the street. It was supposed to be a flawless eternity. But a glitch in the software occurred. David's deep-seated subconscious trauma, his immense guilt over Julie's death, and his raw grief entirely corrupted the system. His own mind essentially twisted his perfect dream into a relentless psychological horror show.
All right, Section 4, the alternate ending.
Now, if you've only seen the theatrical cut, you know it's wildly surreal on its own. But the 2015 Blu-ray release offers an alternate ending that expands this whole climax into something way more desperate. In this extended version, the path to the roof is much more violent and chaotic. First, Dr. McCabe confronts David in a restroom, desperately pleading with him, trying to convince him that life extension is just a massive con. Then, when David runs to the lobby, it isn't just ominously empty. He actually shoots a police officer and gets completely surrounded by a SWAT team. The SWAT team opens fire. David violently blacks out and only then wakes up in the empty lobby to find tech support. Finally, on the rooftop, McCabe is there again, practically collapsing in sheer despair as he tries to keep David grounded in the dream. We also get this beautifully extended, deeply poignant goodbye with the dream version of Sophia, where David tells her he loves her, but he just can't settle for a dream anymore. To wake up in the real world, David has to take a literal leap of faith off the impossibly high building.
And finally, Section 5, 5 ways to interpret.
So he jumps to wake up in the real world 150 years later, right? Well, maybe not. Even with that meticulous tech support explanation, Cameron Crowe famously noted on the DVD commentary that the ending is entirely up for debate. The director himself actually provided 5 distinct, totally valid interpretations of the plot. Number 1, we just take it at face value. Tech support is telling the truth, and it's a 150-year lucid dream. Number 2, the entire film, literally from the very first frame, is a dream. The evidence for this? Early on, there's a registration sticker on David's car that reads February 30th, 2001, a date that obviously doesn't exist. Number 3, everything after the terrible car crash is just a hallucination David is having while trapped in a coma. Number 4, and this one's a real trip, none of it is real. The entire film is actually just the plot of the novel his best friend Brian is writing. And number 5, everything post-crash is a wild, drug-induced hallucination happening while David is undergoing major reconstructive surgery. These 5 interpretations essentially turn what seems like a straightforward sci-fi narrative into a massive, ambiguous puzzle box.
But if you want to know what Cameron Crowe personally leans toward, he points to one incredibly subtle detail. He noted that the sky during David's morning reunion with Sophia, right after he passes out on the street, resembles a Claude Monet painting, specifically a vanilla sky. Crowe states that the presence of this unnaturally beautiful painted sky is the definitive exact marker where the real world ends and the lucid dream officially begins.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to think about David's harrowing journey. Think about the terrifying glitches, the fractured timeline, and those subtle visual clues. How do you define reality within the context of this story? Which of those 5 mind-bending theories do you think actually explains David's journey? It's a film beautifully designed to make you question absolutely everything you just absorbed.
Because whether it was all a dream from the start, a book written by a friend, or a cryonic software glitch 150 years in the future, David leaps from the roof, his life flashes before his eyes, and a female voice speaks to him in the darkness. We leave you with the iconic final words of the story, inviting both David and us as the audience to finally wake up. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.